Okay, so I think everybody's in, so we can make a start. So thanks to everybody for coming today. Today's event is part of a project that is called These Lancashire Women Are Witches in Politics, that we're doing at the Turnpike in Leigh. And it's also, today's event is part of our International Women's Day celebrations. So if you've not met us before, I'm Helen Mather, and I'm doing this project alongside Anna FC Smith. And so, yeah, Anna's going to tell you a little bit more. In fact, just before we go into that, we'll just do the general Zoom housekeeping, which I'm sure you're all familiar with at this point. But just to keep muted, and we'll try to keep muted throughout this until we come to the end. So there's going to be the recorded Zoom, which you can type in any questions in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end. You can have your videos on should you wish, or you can take them off if you want, if you don't want to do that. We are going to be recording this session, the whole of it, so that we can put it out onto YouTube at a later date. So if you don't want to be on that recording, then you might want to turn your videos off. And I think that's everything. Yeah. So Anna's going to tell you a little bit about the background to the project.
So this is a collaborative project and interactive residency between me and Helen, and it's taken its initial inspiration from the history of the Leigh Female Reformers of 1819 and the monstrous representations of them in the media at the time. The Leigh Female Reformers sought parliamentary reform and to have a say in how the country was run through universal suffrage and MP representation. And by universal suffrage, they kind of more meant for their menfolk, though there's some debate around that. We have focused on the language that was used to put down these women, labelling them as monsters, medusas, and other pejorative phrases, and how these terms could actually be harnessed to express a type of power. Drawing on this symbolism and elements of the reform's activities, we're researching and developing work with the Leigh community that weaves a new empowering language based on a shared history of place, myth, power, and witchcraft.
So we're here today with Jess Eastoe. Jess is an activist and works in youth engagement. Jess co-founded BYOU Plus in 2018, which is an LGBTQ plus provision group to empower, engage and support the LGBTQ plus community across Wigan and Leigh. So BYOU Plus are the project leaders in Wigan Pride. Jess is also founder, member of Leigh Pride. She worked at Reclaim, a Manchester-based youth leadership charity with the aim to end leadership inequality within a generation, making sure working class young people are being seen, being heard and leading change. She has been a youth worker and worked for Youth Voice at Wigan Council and is now Equalities Lead at Greater Sport. Jess is also a Labour Party activist campaigning for the party, and she holds the office of Leigh CLP's LGBT executive and is on the Labour campaign forum. So we spoke to Jess at the end of last year in a recorded conversation about her contemporary experiences as a campaigner, activist and youth worker based in Leigh, drawing parallels with the Leigh Female Reformers of 1819. So Jess has actively worked to raise the voices of marginalised communities and working class children, but she's also witnessed and been subjected to abuse similar to that of the female reformers who dared to speak out. So we're going to be playing this recorded conversation and then opening up to a question and answer session at the end. So if you do have any questions that pop up throughout that, just pop them in the chat, and we can get to that. We can get to that at the end. But before we start the conversation, you might have seen that we sent the email out saying a pen and paper, mysterious pen and paper. We'd like to invite you to make a sigil. So this is a magic symbol that is made by writing out an intention and condensing this into a symbol. And we're going to be charging these symbols by engraving them in clay medals in upcoming workshops, which will implant them in the unconscious mind. So all you need is a pen and paper. and to make an intention. So this could be something just for today. It could be something around International Women's Day. It could be something that relates to why you came to hear this conversation today, about voices being heard, about resilience, or about a more progressive future. So yeah.
So if you're, we'll share with you like how to make that in a second, but if you want to keep these sigils to yourself, you obviously you can do, but also you can email them to the Turnpike, and you can also tag us on Instagram, and we'll send you those details if you want to share what you've created. You don't need to share your message, just your actual symbol that you've created, so you can keep almost that message to yourself, like private if you wish to. Obviously, if you want to start writing out other intentions as the conversation goes along, you can do, but you can also obviously fill in and ask questions of Jess into the chat box as well as we play.
Calling the working classes, working women and other marginalised groups a form of beast or witch indicates that those in authority already deem them to have a power, even though that they thought of this as dangerous. But we see this mythical power as having an energy that could express enfranchisement, to the idea of speaking up and roaring together, of cooperating and drawing on ancient magical potency that could be felt by the community today. We want to talk to Jess about her contemporary experiences as both a campaigner and working in youth engagement. So Jess, you've witnessed and been subjected to abuse similar to the female reformers who dared to speak out, and you've also worked directly to give a voice to young people and communities. You've stuck your head above the parapet in the local area, and you're one of the faces of the Believe I'm Only Human campaign in Wigan. You've worked for Pride and you've campaigned for Labour MPs and council candidates in the area. So having this profile, you've like witnessed and you've suffered abuse. What types of terms have you noticed people use in order to put down those who've raised their heads?
Yes, there's a lot to unpick there really, because there's different types of abuse that I think I've seen. There's that ingrained low-level, quite covert misogyny, where there's nitpicking and whataboutery for a lot of women that men don't face.
Yeah.
So there's questions like, well, who's looking after the children? Or how does she manage to do it all if you're elected and you've got a job? Like the audacity that men don't seem to face, because obviously for a while we had a female MP and we got a lot of questions and an undertone of misogyny about where her children were. And of course the person before, Andy Burnham, had children, never got asked where his children were, never got asked how he's managing. Is it not a struggle to do both? And it gets you down after a while, because it brings into question why you've done what you've done to get to the position you are. Like, should I not do that because I'm female? And it makes you question who you are as a person. Am I a rubbish mum? Am I a rubbish member of my family because I'm concentrating on politics and trying to put myself out there? And then the second tier, I think the one that's probably affected me more, is just the overtly sexist and over-sexualized abuse that a lot of men get. It's usually a lot of women get from men. Mm-hmm. For me personally, it's the question of my sexuality. obviously I'm out and proud. Both my parents know, all my family knows I'm in a very happy relationship with another woman, but people still question or label me as the lesbian or the one that did Wigan Pride, rather than actually identifying the fact that I'm a lot more than just the lesbian in the Labour Party. And I've had men talk about the fact that I just need a man to sort me out. They've made comments that I've seen to other MPs about what they look like. Lisa Nandy has got quite a lot of abuse about it, about a chest. She's been told she's got blowjob lips. All of these things that are just really abominably sexist. And then the argument from them back is it's not sexist. We're just pointing it out, or they don't identify the fact that the way they speak about or to women is completely different to how they speak to men. Unfortunately, it's not currently getting any less, I think, because of the leadership in this country and our partners in America who seem to shadow. I think it's given people on the ground permission to speak like that because they know the leaders in this country do. So it's like a free pass.
Yeah.
There's a total legitimacy, isn't there, of like what's happening. And I think as well, like there is that thing of like when divisiveness, like when you start to get people on like very polar opposite ends of politics and of like belief systems, you get this like raising up of voices like that. So whereas we feel that in a lot of ways rights are being kind of addressed and things are kind of progressing, there's like a harsher backlash. But I agree with what you're saying, though. It doesn't seem to be addressed that well, does it?
Doesn't.
Like, you know, with the Believe I'm Only Human campaign, like obviously that was like an attempt by the council to try and sort of like temper abuse a little bit and kind of like demonstrate that everyone's a human, which I mean obviously shouldn't be demonstrated because it just is true. But, like it was, you know, like people have different identities and different needs, and you can just but treat everybody as equal. Like, but that actual campaign got so much backlash.
That campaign was actually one of the most fun that I've done. Actually, it was really good, mainly because of where it was shot and like the photos were in like derelict buildings, and it was just really, really nice to meet all these lovely people. But the backlash that we got was defaced billboards. There was a so-called comedian who made a lot of videos about it, demonstrating homophobia, racism, misogyny, ableism, everything you could think of, we got it. There was a political candidate who switched parties a few times. He said that it's an attack on the white man because there wasn't any white men in the photo shoot. However, there was. It just so happened that the white men were demonstrating age because one was an elderly gentleman, he was lovely, and the other man, who was also white, was in a wheelchair. So that to me showed covert prejudice, because you don't necessarily want a white man to represent other white men. You want straight, middle-aged, specific, targeted white men. At that time in politics, during Brexit, before and after the actual vote referendum, the abuse that women were getting was horrific, to the point where we needed security to go to events. I was at an event once and we walked from Wigan Town Hall to the Old Courts. We needed security for that because people were gunning for these left-wing liberals who fund the arts, who support LGBT people, and apparently that's just a no-go area. So we needed security, and the police were alerted to it because of how overt they were. They were going on camera saying really horrific things about women, sexualizing it. There was photos of women who were in politics or public office, photoshopped onto naked bodies and shared. as a way to just demoralise and vilify other leaders that we've got. And there was no real consequences to that. And they don't, I think the people that do it don't understand people are watching, and that's how we radicalise, that's how we put people off politics. If you want representation in politics and you want voices to be heard, regardless of where they sit on the political spectrum, we need a kind of politics, because it's just putting people off.
There's so many tools as well that are like applied to these things, and I think like going back to like female reformers and like one of the political prints that we saw that we've been like using quite a lot in our initial research, and like there's a female St. George, she's like a fat female St. George, and she's riding a dragon, and it's like sexual kind of like,
yeah.
So all of it
riding
like
with this dragon,
yeah, all of this like imagery and all of these tropes, they've just been so overused.
but
Yeah.
Like they're
what's
just
amazing,
go-to tools, aren't they?
what's amazing about that particular political print, so it's got female reformers on the stage, and they've got gin bottles, and they're wearing breeches, and they've got their dresses tucked into the breeches. So like,
Right.
This is obviously, according to that era, an absolute travesty.
Yeah.
But to us, it's like, yeah, like of course you would do that. You
Yeah.
can climb up on a stage if you've got like breeches on rather than stupidly long dress.
Yeah.
And they're obviously standing and screaming and shouting, which is, according to the print,
Yeah.
horrendously wrong, but it's hard to see it as being negative when you're looking at
But
this
also,
writhing woman who's kind of like in charge of this beast. Like I can't see how on earth that could be a problem.
Yeah.
But that would have been the funniest thing ever, like according to those eyes.
Yeah.
And also, it's really sexual because one of the male reformers is holding a banner that's coming up from between his legs, and the female reformers kind of capping it with a cap of liberty, but it's kind of got like a masturbation sort of like connotation in it, and this man is like really weak, so it's like these women are sexually knowing, which is obviously a
yeah, and dominating.
Yeah.
And also kind of going back to what you were initially saying, Jess, about this idea of like, well, how are you managing, like if you've got children, if you've got family,
the bad mother thing was a big one. Like there was
it?
Yeah.
So they've got like babies under their arms and gin bottles under the other arm, and the babies have got knives, and like there's babies running around the hustings, and they're like setting
not being watched by the mothers,
being watched, and that whole like bad mother thing, and in a way it's kind of part of the language that the reformers used to appeal to people, was like, as a wife, as a mother, it was a knowing way of kind of going, I'm gonna preempt that you're gonna suggest that I'm being like a bad mother by saying these things, but as a wife, as a mother, as a sister, I think that we need to do this for our families. It was that way of kind of subversing like how you get around those things and how you become political without being, I mean, they're obviously knowing that they're going to be put down, they're knowing that they're not going to be accepted, so like how to circumvent that a little bit and like play the role a little bit, and and do that. So there's it's just not new, is it? It's
not new.
Shall I ask the next
one? We were interested in the types of people, without naming names, who appear to be utilising abusive and name calling as a form of opposition. So like by types meaning like, are they in power themselves, like direct opposition as in like they want power, are they from similar backgrounds to those who they abuse or like call names, what do you think they aim to gain from using this kind of abuse?
For me it's all of the above, which is shameful in itself really, but I think the over toxic environment of over sexualized language, the social media keyboard warriors, I think that usually is opposition. It's usually, well, she's in this position of power, she's got this following, So I'm going to try and bring her down with any means necessary. I got a bunch of abuse a couple of weeks ago. For no apparent reason, I just commented on something, he saw it and then told me I was a 10-pinter, and alluded to the fact that he wouldn't even rape me. So I was like, good, like I'm quite glad of that. He eventually got blocked because he went a bit far, but I didn't do anything. So I think that is people that don't like the beliefs that I have or how I go about my daily life, and or don't like my job. So people seem to believe that because I work with young people and I inspire them, it's just a big conspiracy for me to get them to think how I think. Even though I went to university and I trained in my profession, that doesn't count because I vote Labour. I must want other kids to vote Labour too. And it completely puts down the fact that it's a career that I've built up from scratch myself. And then moving on from that, I think inwardly, for a man, middle-aged usually is the target audience that I get abuse from. I think there's people within, like, that's on your team, that are on your side, that do it for an ego boost, and I think it's ingrained within how they grew up or the environment that they live within. To me, I call it toxic masculinity. To them, they just call it normal. I think there's that preconception that if a woman is going forward to put herself above the parapet, I think automatically a man's response is, oh, she's bossy, she's dominant, she's domineering, and turning her power and her words and her passion and drive into something negative. Like if you give a cracking speech about something you're passionate about, you get told that you're formidable, you're angry. I get told I'm angry all the time. I'm not. I'm usually sarcastic, but I'm not angry. I'm passionate about what I'm talking about. But if a man gave that speech, and this has happened to me before, people start nodding their heads, they start agreeing. Yeah, I wish I could make it political and be like, it's this political party that do it, but it's not. There's just a lot of toxic masculinity, and it's hard to change that preconceived idea that a lot of that generation have.
I totally agree, and I think it really plays out in big stages as well. Like we see, like it's taken Joe Biden to stand, it's taken an old white man to stand up to an old white man in America, and you kind of see it and get behind it because we're not at a place where people can accept a woman on that stage to go against
and it took him to hold the hand of a woman from, like,
absolutely,
different backgrounds and stuff, but it's like he almost had to become the shield to bring her forward. I mean, and hopefully that is a step that now something else is going to happen, but it is just that that Kamala Harris wouldn't have been seen as being sort of like a safe bet alone. But it's interesting with the fact that it can be from your own side or from an opposing side, because it was exactly the same for the reformers, just bringing it back to that, but it was exactly the same for them. Like they were completely supported by certain men within the movement, and they were written about in terms of like Joan of Arc and these kind of, but quite mythical creatures in that own way, but a positive mythical thing. But then, and some of the men supported the idea of even entire suffrage, like going to women as well as men, which was like shocking. But a lot of the men on the same side thought that they were in the way, that they shouldn't have been on the platforms, that they were ruining the reform movement, that they should be back in the kitchen or back in the workplace and not getting involved. So they weren't universally supported within the movement.
And similarly with women as well. I mean, there's accounts of like women going into, like, on the day of the Peterloo massacre, like women in their reform movements, in their reform society kind of groupings with banners, walking into Petersfield, and like women who were not involved on the side of the road heckling them.
Shouting, "Go home, where are your children?"
Same thing, and that's
like,
kind of like ingrained idea of like where you should be and what you should be doing.
Again, that still happens today. I think there's a lot of people judging others by their standards, and I think if a woman wants to be or has lived a life where she is a homemaker, a parent first, or her priorities are different, she sort of shuns people that will live differently to them. Doesn't necessarily mean that because of their judgment it's wrong. Like, you need the diversity in women, but I think they feel that it is. Like, how can you live your life differently to mine?
Do you think it's natural for dehumanizing and undermining language to be used against opponents, specifically in a political sphere? Political sphere.
I thought about this question quite a lot, actually, because to me, no, it's really not. I struggle with it a lot because it's not who I am as a person, but I think that to other people makes me look naive. But I think for far too long there has been no check and challenge in politics. We've allowed people to get away with what they do and what they say because of their class, because of their sexuality, because of their race, because of their gender or sex. And I think now that we've got this social media platform, we've got people checking and challenging that, saying, well, actually, you did say watermelon smiles at one time, so we should pull that up. But locally, again, it brings it back to the fact that political leaders have done it, can do it. Why can't we? I remember once I was getting a lot of abuse. I think it was the Believe I'm Only Human campaign by an activist and now councillor who didn't agree with what I was saying and doing. So I saw him in person. So I went up to him and I questioned him and said, you can call me stupid for being Labour, you can call me whatever you want about my political beliefs, but you don't need to bring my sexuality in it at every turn. It doesn't matter to me, it doesn't affect my life. Everybody already knows I'm gay, I'm proud, I've co-founded a Pride, you can't be more gay. So, and he basically said, you've put yourself out there as a political activist, you need to expect that. And for me, I sat on that for a while because no, I don't expect it and I don't accept it at all. You're the ones with the problem, not me. And I think as a woman in politics, when we were campaigning to get our first female MP, how we'd never had one before, I don't know. Jo Cox was murdered because she was a woman that put herself forward and the opposition didn't like it. We tried hard locally to make sure that that never happened and we never got abuse. And yeah, we've all faced nastiness and abusive comments, threats of death, rape, violence. So how are we supposed to be on our platform and know for sure that that's not going to happen to us? Because there's no one really protecting us. You get stabbed in the back everywhere you go. So how are we supposed to protect ourselves?
Kind of what you're saying about this idea, this kind of going back to that question of like, is it natural that like some people do feel that it's, oh well, it's par for the course, like you put yourself out there, so therefore there's an element of like deserving a certain like level of abuse. So therefore when it comes to violence, it's like, well, we're not going to take it massively seriously because you're kind of already
but I've heard the same thing, like from people who I've known, you know, obviously in politics, and then, you know, sort of levels of abuse that they've received, like, you know, of all, you know, genders or, you know, identities as well. But other people, if I've ever mentioned it, have just gone, oh well. Do you know, people on sort of like, you know, who wouldn't normally be the types of people who would use or anything like that, probably kind of like maybe more liberal minded or whatever, have just used that phrase, oh well, that's just politics. You know, like, and I've been like, oh, is it? You know, like, is it actually just politics? Is it okay? And then and then it's like, when do you start considering that this is not being punching up? You know, like the abuse that people in sort of political office, not in politics, but in more kind of like governmental office in the local area, people who were making those abusive images of her would see themselves as punching up.
For sure. I noticed that quite a lot. I got probably about 10% of that abuse, and there was other people that got the rest, which led to the demise of a very fantastic career, really. Someone had to leave because it just got too scary, it got too much. There was backstabbing, there was misogyny, and the police did nothing. There was situations where this specific woman could have died, including tampering with a car, turning up at her house where her children also live. There was really, really scary times, and nobody did anything because it was punching up. Well, she's in this position of power, so there's nothing we're going to do about it.
Horrific. That is such a horrific thing. And it is like, I mean, it, like, following on from that, it's like, what effect do you think this has on people who may want to raise their voice? And you know, that's the effect of that in the extreme, is that it silences people. And that's like, it's understandable that somebody wanted to leave that situation because they were frightened for their own life. Like, that's
I think for me as well, to sort of bring race into it, Diane Abbott, agree with her politics or not, the fact that she is abused on a daily basis due to her sex and race, I think is shocking that it's still allowed, and not a lot gets done about it.
It is posited again that, well, she's put herself in that position, so that's fair game. And it, I mean, how you create those sort of lines between, you know, all policy is fair game for criticism. You know, like, obviously, if there's like deemed sort of like inability to achieve something or whatever, then that is fair game. But it's, why are you saying someone can't do it? Or why are you like, if you're saying it's due to their race, their sexuality, their gender, then that surely has to be a no-go.
I wish I could say that it was just opposition and it's that toxic political environment, but it's really not. It can be anyone. There's people who would vote the same, would agree with the same principles as you, that still have an issue with you being an outspoken woman.
That's like a big part of what we're talking about really in this project as well. Is like the language and the symbols of power and things like that, they can easily, well, they are flipped, because like Anna was saying before about the women that we're looking at in this political cartoon, and you're like, wear trousers,
ride that dragon.
Ride that dragon. Like, you know, maybe have a bit of the dragon on again. It's a hard life, you know. All of these things are like, well, I mean, I know we're looking at it in a different context and from different eyes, but like, calling them witches, we've been like harnessing that idea of like of magic and witches as transgressive people, as people who were, you know, wanting to bring a community together. They were often women who were knowledgeable women in a society where they were the woman that you would go to with issues, you know, like with your issues, that she may have a herbal remedy to support them. They were really early physicians, really. They were early doctors, and all these kinds of things. They were very much like central, powerful women within a community. So take it. We'll take the witch. And to take the power out of the opposing sort of viewpoint of that, or the negative within that.
Next one. So you've worked with the charity Reclaim and other roles as well, with working class children, assisting them in finding their voice and taking leadership. What have you found to have been some of the greatest barriers to them finding a voice that they've initially felt or experienced? So before you work with them, or what they've spoken about?
For me, as the youth worker on projects, it's tokenism. It makes me angry every day. I hear it and I see it all the time. Yeah, we're listening to this young person, we're really taking it in, and then no change happens. Because you've made yourself look good, you've boosted your own ego by saying, I work with children and young people, I'm good at that, and then you do nothing about what they've said. And the sort of neglect to something that you see as small, which is actually massive for children and young people, that for me really, really puts down what youth work is about, because I'm here to build their resilience. I never overpromise, so I don't underdeliver. I try my best to make their voices heard. The fact that it's not, you can't go into politics or you can't go into leadership with rose-tinted glasses on, because as much as I want it to change, we're still in the same place we were during the Reformers. That yes, you're young, so you've got that barrier. You're female or you're working class. Obviously, Reclaim is all about the working classes. So there's going to be those barriers, but it's about flipping the language for them. So I've had young people been told that they are bossy when they're not, they're bold. So we built Reclaim built a project on that, about being proud to be a feminist and fighting for equality. That comes with problems itself, because if you teach or spread awareness of feminism, people get annoyed, they don't like that, because who wants equality for women? Like, so bold.
Sounds dangerous to me.
It's about finding a nice environment for them, but also preparing them for the real world if they do become an activist. One of Reclaim's alumni, she's called Olivia. She won't mind being in this, actually. You should interview her, actually. She's great. She's taken on Lawrence Fox. She's taken him on.
Yeah.
She's raised a lot of money, but she's sort of understood now that it's quite a bit of a toxic atmosphere. There's people going on her profile and screenshotting her because she's got the audacity to take on Lawrence Fox to say, actually, Reclaim's taken. You can't just name a party after a charity. Try doing it to Oxfam. See how far you get. So because there's Lawrence Fox seemed to have got £5 million overnight, and Reclaim weren't happy about that, because it just proves that middle class and upper class people will remain to have the power, and working class young people, sorry, you've got to change, you've got to make the sacrifice, you don't have the money nor the power to do this. So Reclaim alumni didn't like that, and I think it was a boost and a step into the real world for a lot of people that have gone through the youth service, because you've got the youth worker there that sort of makes sure you're safe. Obviously, safeguarding is important, and then when you've gone into the real world to take on a celebrity, I think it was a bit of a shock. Like, actually, women in politics, they've got it tough. Before any sort of youth voice and leadership, there's Youth Work 101 is resilience building for young people. Whether you go out and be an activist or you go out and be an architect, resilience building comes in handy. You've got transferable skills there. So I think being that role model sort of helps. I've been drafted into a few sort of political youth work settings, politics with a little p, like I don't go on wearing a rosette. Just to inspire young people and say, these are the barriers, but this is what we do to overcome them. And the positives do weigh out the negatives, especially when it's a social media campaign that's against you. There are ways of working in an atmosphere with people against you and just overcoming that. For me, role models are really, really important. Representation. I think the use of who inspires you sort of inspires others as well. So with young people, it's the big ones like Michelle Obama, because young people love her.
I love her.
Yeah. And then you can localise it. The fact that we had our first female MP that when I was delivering leadership was great, fantastic, because you can't be what you can't see.
And we're interested in the language, how they refer to themselves as part of this empowerment as well, like the language that they use about themselves. Is that something that you that you teach or you use with young people?
So it's about being true to yourselves. We strip it back before we get to labeling, before we get to names of who I am. It's about how you feel and who you see yourself and where you see yourself, and where you see yourself in a community as well. Because community, I think, is used as like a generic term, but you've got different communities within a community. So I think seeing yourself within that, and you build from there your own identity. It doesn't necessarily mean your identity needs to be because of the protected characteristics you have, because although the Equality Act, love it, granted, I think it's not a list of how you define yourself. I think we need to move past that and say, well, yes, I am gay, but I'm also creative. Or yes, I am a woman, but I'm also a working class, creative, LGBT, everything, who I am. It's a package, and I think building the package is really, really important, because young people can't identify themselves as a tick box exercise, because that does nothing for your mental health. So I think building your own identity, for me, stripping it back, and and respect the fluidity of it all. Like if you want to be,
like, don't box, you know, like, you can't
Yeah.
box someone off, can you? So like, oh, I am this.
yeah,
Like, not always, you know, even if you're just going to give yourself a descriptor, like if someone says
Yeah.
like, you know, you're creative, or, you know,
Yeah.
outspoken, I'm actually not always.
yeah,
I mean,
sometimes I'm not, I'm
not,
analytic, yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like almost like you are an ebbing, flowing identity that will
Yeah.
go and change in within an afternoon.
That's how I'm going to see myself going forward, because we all change, but finding your base and your personality doesn't necessarily have to align with this tick box exercise we put ourselves in. And stripping it back further, language is so important. There's an exercise that we always do of what language do you like? Do you like being called sassy, or do you hate it? Because you get a lot of children, particularly girls, who are fierce, who are feminine, who are bold, that get called sassy. Well, do you want to be called sassy, or do you want to be known as something else? And you need to be correcting people. You need to get to a mental place where you are brave, you have courage to say, actually, I'm not sassy, I'm fierce, or I'm not bossy, I'm bold. Things like that. I think the language is really important.
Well,
Right.
we've got one more question, haven't
Go
we?
on.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously part of it will have been covered within it, but we just want to kind of like define this down. So
Yeah.
the female reformers lived at a time when Manchester and like Leigh didn't have MP representation at all, and Wigan did, but voting was restricted to the system called Scotland Lot, where you had to pay a tax
Yeah.
in order to vote, and also men who were made freemen by the really kind of like minimal corporation, small corporation, were also able to vote. But across the country, the franchise was completely different in each different borough and constituency. It was complicated, heavily elitist, and ripe for corruption. In your opinion, what do you think prevents people in the local area from getting their voices heard today? In a political realm, potentially.
In a political realm,
If it's not.
I think it's very complex and intersectional, really. For me, it's class. I think people who have always lived one way of life don't see themselves of climbing that ladder of becoming a community activist or leader. I think for me that is a barrier for a lot of people. Well, I'm just from a council estate, so why would anyone want to vote for me? That, and I think the lack of progression, I struggle a lot with this, because we've got a lot of left-leaning progressive men that won't budge. I get it that you're very liberal in your ideas, but make room. Just make room for other people, because it's very dominated by how it's always been. This is the status quo, let's not change it. And that for me is a huge barrier. Like, the fact that we pinpoint what a woman's role in politics is, that stresses me out a lot, because when we decided as a borough that we're going to put women on cabinet, finally, why would we have not done that before? The portfolio they went to is children and young people. And I remember someone that did that job, her background was marketing, but she went on children and young people. I think that's created a huge barrier and there's not been a cultural shift, and because of the toxic atmosphere that the opposition have created, I think that just adds to it, really. I think my young people would tell me off if I didn't mention this, actually, that as a society we need to progress, that there's still people that can't vote that should be voting, so 16 and 17 year olds. And I know a lot of people don't like it, votes for 16. They think, no, they don't know their own mind yet, but you can join the army. But,
yeah, well, also the female reformers, one of their calls was no vote, no taxation without representation, which has been a continual call, which was like the call of the American Revolution, and it was the call of like some of the reformers, like that was one of the kind of like the things that they wanted, and then it's obviously gone through to the suffragettes as well, but you are taxed at 16.
So we need someone there. I think as well, for the negative people that are going to watch this and say no, 16-year-olds shouldn't be voting, I think they've not looked into votes at 16 enough, because what it actually is a package of political education. It's not just you turn 16, vote. Because there's 30, 40, 50-year-olds that don't know who they're voting for, so why do we think a 16-year-old will? But it's that schooling, that education, things that are Googleable for young people, to say this is what you're going to be voting for. You need to form an opinion there, because that's part of voting. It's not just turn up and vote for who your mate votes for. We can't continue like that. I feel, for me, vote at 16, and we need progressive people that are going to back that, because there's very loud, very passionate 16 and 17-year-olds that have just gone into the big wide world, either further education, an apprenticeship, or working, that don't have any sort of representation, nor are they heard on a platform.
I think that's a really good point.
I think it's a really good point, and I think it's also like it feels a really timely point, not just for that age group, but definitely to bring into education this idea of like how you choose that, how you look at information and decide whether it's accurate information, whether it's like how you sort of research,
critical thinking and proper research. And
identifying disinformation and all that kind of thing, because I think that's something that's like we've just not been equipped with the tools for, and we've become victims of in a lot of ways.
And another thing that I feel like it's like one of my bugbears is like it's literal political education as to, you know, just learning about what a council is and what its remit is currently. You know, like what a councillor is, what cabinet means, like what an electoral system actually is, like, because once you tool people up with just literal facts, it's void of any sort of like what is good and what is bad. It allows people to then go, hang on a minute, that doesn't seem fair to me, or actually I didn't realize it worked like that. I've been having this problem and I've never known who to contact. Now I know. Like, for example, I mean, one thing like that's, even though the MPs expenses and everything has obviously been a horrendous scandal, MPs are often like, you know, accused of like, you know, having high wages or whatever, but they don't realise that actually was a massive point of campaigning, that you cannot be something like an MP without being waged. Before, the elitist system was you had a lot of money elsewhere. I mean, that still happens.
You can afford it.
But before, it was like you literally had to have like an inherited income or land or other sort of like financial interest to even become an MP, because there was no wage with it. So no person could just go into that role. And that
Yeah.
was one of the other things that like the reformers of this time were calling for was it was yearly elections, and it was particularly Chartists actually, and to pay MPs so that working people could become MPs. So it's kind of weird now that we have like the counterbalance where people are saying MPs are paid too much.
Yeah.
Perhaps, maybe, in my opinion, cutting off other income streams. But allowing actually to do a job, it should be considered a valuable job, and it should be given financial support, because then we can have more working people from diverse backgrounds able to do it properly.
That's actually reminded me of something that we got quite a lot during the Labour Party campaigns, is the idea that the MP was a careerist. That really, really bothers me, because it's used as an insult, and it's one that Andy Burnham never faced, may I add. But because this woman had dared to go into the political atmosphere, she was called a careerist. And how is that a negative? Sorry, why is
understood that one as a negative?
Building a career a negative? But can you be a careerist if you want to climb the ladder in retail? Are you a careerist? What are you like associating that with? Like the opportunity? It's not like she's given the opportunity; she's worked for it. She's collected a mandate and been voted in. And for me, I think it underpins misogyny and this covert abusive relationship we've got. They're just a covert. They're just a careerist. They're in it for the money. I struggle with that a little bit, because I'm in a place where I want my politicians to be a careerist, because I want them to be good at it.
You want them to be professional, you want them to be learned, you want them to be like, continually developing, and all the things that I think, the idea of career,
it seems like the opposite as well. It's like hobbyist. I mean, like, who wants an MP who's a hobbyist? Or just
do it on the weekends.
I struggle with it a lot, because I get it a lot from the opposition mainly. You're a careerist politician. I'm not even a councillor. I'm just an activist that you don't like enough to stalk, so it's on you that. It's strange.
It's been so lovely to speak to you.
Is there anything else you sort of like you'd want to add or like tell us about, or think we should kind of like explore?
I think for me it's the fact that I'm in a place where I feel it's worth it. The positives do weigh out the negatives in a lot of ways. I think we can't sugarcoat it and be like, it's fantastic, it's great being a woman in politics, but we also I don't want people to see my career or political interest as a negative and put them off, because I do get a lot of shade. I get called a lesbian, even though I've never forgot that I was one. I think
a reminder.
Yeah, thank you. I just think there's a lot of change to be made. It boils down to the fact I don't know where it came from. My mum thinks it's really exciting, the fact that I'm such a change maker. Like I get really aggy with just watching change, especially when it's slow. I think for me, just to inspire others with it, like we do get called weird names, like, and allude to sex lives a lot, but we also do have an audience of people that listen and are inspired, and that's intersectional, it's intergenerational. There's more women now that we've had a female MP involved in the Labour Party than there ever was before. So I think just the people that you work with, just to continue the inspiration there as well, that we can reclaim this. We can say, I am a witch, or I am any other negative connotation, but I'm proud of that. I think that's for me going forward, just to make sure that wherever I don't know where you're putting this really, but just to make sure that people know that it's a positive thing, that what I do, not necessarily just negative.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
That's brilliant. That is really great. Thanks so much for chatting to us.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jess.
It's all right. See you later.
Yeah.
Bye.
Amazing.
I
hope everybody enjoyed that. So Helen, do you want to
Yeah, I'm gonna start.
So just, we've not even had a hello from Jess yet, really.
I know.
Jess is here.
Hi, hello.
That was really brilliant, and I apologise. We probably should have said that we speak about some pretty horrific things in there, so I hope everyone's
Yeah.
We probably should have said that earlier. But we're all here. Jess is fighting. And we're doing all right.
Yeah, so we've thanks so much for people sending us questions in. We've got a load of questions to put to Jess, and we've got one that somebody, so you might want to ask in real life, or I can read them out. So we've got
Should we start with
Hannah.
Should we start with ours, Helen, and then
I was going to go straight into the questions that other people have, just if that's all right. Because we've got quite a few here. I feel like we might want to just get to people's first. We've had our moments, Anna. So I don't know whether Hannah wants to say this or whether you want me to say this. I'm fine saying it.
I can. I'll just read out what I wrote.
Yeah.
So it was earlier in when you were talking about the kind of almost accepted that toxic masculinity is ingrained into the culture of British politics. So my question is, what hope is there? And are there examples you've seen or role models that are switching that narrative? And will the next generation be different?
It's a really good question, actually, because when I did, me and Leslie, some of you know Leslie, she's great. We did a really big campaign with some young lads in Leigh about toxic masculinity. And when we did it, the publicity was a lot of men not quite understanding what we meant by it, and they thought it was an attack on masculinity. So just as a disclaimer, it's really not. A lot of men don't have toxic masculinity, but it just so happens that a lot of men in politics do. So toxic masculinity is this idea that you've got to live your life a certain way. So you've got to be strong, you've got to be abrupt, you've got to bottle up all your emotions, don't cry in public, all of these things. And that leads to poor mental health, anger issues, domestic abuse in a lot of circumstances. So over the past decade, I would say there's been a huge campaign on why do young men get told that that's how they've got to live their life, when it does actually create a very high suicide rate, high DMV. So it's those sorts of things there that we're trying to challenge. So role models for switching the narrative locally, and it came as a shock to me actually, was Leigh Centurions, the rugby team. So when we did a toxic masculinity event, we did a lads' night in, which was a girls' night in, but for lads. So we had a lot of guest speakers there that talked about how they are proud to be a feminist, domestic abuse, crying as an emotion, not just when you're hurt, that sort of thing. But Leigh Centurions publicised the event for us, and they got involved. And I remember some rugby players came for a question and answer with young people, and I don't think they knew much about the subject. And when they sat down, there was this rugby player called AJ, he's really nice, sat down, and his first question was, when was the last time you cried? So he sat there like, oh, that's just like, he had no idea what to say, completely thrown off. And then when it got involved, he came away and learned something from the young people, that actually, yes, he is a big burly man, but to be in touch with his feminine side, or just to show his emotions and cry when an animal dies on a film, is completely normal, instead of bottling it up. So I think for me, the role models come from the young people that are pushing forward. There's a lot of celebrities that have talked about, that have come, a lot of male celebrities that have come out of the Me Too campaign saying, actually, there's a sort of hidden male toxic environment as well. So it's got celebrity endorsement as well, but young people who are open to this and understand how important it is to show your emotions, they're sort of leading the way. So I hope in 10 years there will be a change there, because the culture is changing, hopefully. I just know that in the older generations, not to label everyone, it just so happens that probably the worst of toxic masculinity is in that generation.
And it comes from probably women didn't express themselves in certain ways as well, and a whole different way of living. Culture was just so different in people's upbringings from the 40s, 50s.
Yeah, completely. Socialization, completely.
And also, I think men of me and Helen's generation, sort of in their 30s, 40s.
That was generous.
But yeah, even men that I know are kind of roughly around my age, are equally toxic, can be equally toxic, even when they're kind of banging on about liberal values. They're like, and you won't listen to me because I. So so it's our generation needs to learn as well.
And the main hit back that I've had from doing work on toxic masculinity and men's work in general is that it's an attack on men, but it's the toxicity, I can never say that, toxicity, the System of a Down song that men have isn't just for men. There's a lot of toxic values that women do hold as well. So I'm guilty of it. If I'm frustrated, then I present that in anger, when really I'm just really frustrated because I don't understand something, especially like maths. But it's having that as your personality and not actually reflecting on the fact that there's other ways to deal with your emotion than hitting out. So yeah, it's not an attack on men, and I worry that some people think it is. But
I think sometimes when you shine a light on something, people can feel attacked, and it's actually more about trying to, first of all, put a word, a name something, and raise an awareness around that, and have conversations about it. And like the work that you're doing with young people around that sounds like you're encouraging conversation around that, and I think that's just such an important thing with anything, to pull something apart, to pick it apart a bit and just work out what it is, and how useful is this to everybody in society.
Amy just raised her hand if you'd like to.
Hi, I'm Amy.
Hi.
I was thinking when you were talking about you're not, just because you're saying that things aren't fair as a woman, it doesn't mean I'm taking away power from you. It means I want to level the power. And I was thinking it's exactly the same stuff that they talk about in America when they talk about reverse racism. And I just went, gosh, people, or the fact that you don't want to make someone feel inadequate by taking up some power. It's like, I ain't taking anything from you. I'm just here, but that, I was just thinking
Yeah, completely.
Sorry.
No, it's like perfect. The parallels in terms of people's reactions to someone else claiming it, it's a feeling like there's some sort of conquest being taken, something's being taken from, but actually it's not really about that. It's about giving back as well, because everybody benefits from a society that has happy people in it, that has people who are fulfilled. Do you know, like if you've got people who are not fulfilled and are subjugated, you might have a kind of like a shiny white tower, but you're not, it's not a good society. It's not a healthy society, and it's not a successful society.
And I think, Jess, you said it in the question, in the conversation before as well. It's not necessarily about taking things from people. It's about making space.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important way of phrasing it, because you can make space. Like if we all had a big sort of circle around us of like what we had, it's not it's detrimental.
I do speak quite frequently in the Labour Party. For those that are a member of my local Labour Party, they will know that I am a broken record there. I pipe on about the youth service, youth voice, and women in politics relentlessly. But I'm not going into politics thinking I want to deselect all the old white men to make room for young women. That's not what I want to do. But what I do want to see is the ideas being shared, a fair and equal system that empowers diverse people to get into the positions when there is space or when there is an open selection panel, is what we call it. I'm not saying deselect anyone. I'm just saying you need to be considering that you can't just have another middle-aged white man filling in the space of a middle-aged white man, because it's regressive. We're not getting anywhere. We're not achieving anything further than what we achieved in the 70s.
Absolutely. I think we've got another question. Just I'm doing it chronologically, even though I know that there's some crossovers in different questions. But I don't know whether Helen, whether you want to ask your question or whether you want me to ask it.
Yeah, it was following on from Hannah, actually. Probably had the same thinking. It's about optimism, and I know you work with some amazing young people, Jess, and it was just about whether you saw that glimmer of change within them. I think you probably already answered that already. I know the young people that we work with, we certainly do, and that keeps us optimistic every day. Yeah. So it was just about, can you give us a bit of hope?
Yeah. Weirdly, I was having this conversation with my mum the other day. Because I was really annoyed at something to do with funding and the budget and lack of youth service money. It drives me mad a lot, because a lot of politicians will say, I'm supporting young people, but you've actually got youth workers facing a restructure, facing job loss. So that it bothers me a lot. So when I was in this conversation with my mum, she was saying, but Jess, you're just going to fight for the underdog. No matter what information you have, you're going to support the underdog. And I think that's reflected in youth work. So I've worked with young people that have been written off from education, the school, because teachers, I'm not bashing teachers at all. Teachers don't have the capacity to nurture every diamond in the rough. They don't have the time, they don't have the capacity. So I work with these young people that haven't been given any opportunity to find their passions, and usually they're really creative. It's just not curriculum creative, it's a different kind. So I think the nurture that we find in these young, feisty young people that will F and Jeff at you if you've annoyed them, that they just need a role model, someone to love them and someone to love platonically, obviously. But if you show them the love, the care and the positive attention that they crave, they are definitely good examples of future emerging leaders. I think so. I know some of the young people that I've worked with, a lot of people are scared of them, but when I've worked with them, they're like a spider. They're more scared of us than we are of them. So it's those sort of young people, I think, in 10 years' time, they're definitely ones to watch.
That's exciting.
Great.
We've got, I know Elizabeth wants to ask a question.
I just wanted to make a remark about Elizabeth was saying that "You Ride the Dragon" should be a new mantra, and I think it should be, definitely. But also just wanted to let everyone know that we'd been confused for quite a while about, in this political print, which Helen put a link to if anyone wants to look at it. But on this piece of like a clothing which is called a Skimmington banner, there's this female St George riding a dragon, and for ages we've been baffled about really kind of why that was bad and how it was funny, just assuming that in the 19th century, got myself confused now, 19th century, 1800s, why that would be so funny. But actually it turns out it was a sexual slogan, it was a sexual term. So riding St George, or like riding St George was a concept, or riding the dragon was a sexual term for women on top in sex. So that was the direct,
right,
Cruikshank was that was the joke, so everyone would have known that phrase. It's like, riding cowboy or something now, like that was the phrase. So he was directly kind of like visualizing a sexual term about the idea of the woman being on top. in sexual congress. So there you go. It's just that.
We're bringing it back. So you ride that dragon.
Any dragon, whatever you want your dragon. So, but yeah, did Elizabeth have an actual question as well? Sorry.
Yeah, no, sort of a question and not a question, but separating your LGBTQ, separating the Leigh Labour or Labour as it is as a whole. Has there only been a time in your life, Jess, when you've stood up on your own for something that you believe in, where you've not had people behind you?
Yeah, quite a lot. I think it's very easy because I am Labour. I don't agree with everything in Labour, don't get me wrong. It's very easy to think she's saying that because she's Labour, but there's many a time where I've stood up for something that I think is wrong, that needs changing, that other people across the political spectrum don't necessarily agree with, or don't care enough to make a change, is what I find quite a lot. Like, people care but don't want to do anything, and I've found that with the votes for 16. It's a national campaign, like WASPy is a national campaign, but locally you've got a team that does it. And I think I was a lone soldier in that for quite some time, because a lot of people didn't get it. Like I said, people think you just turn up at 16 and you vote, but the votes for 16 and votes at 16 as a political campaign is a lot more. It's political education, it's understanding democracy and how everything works. So I stood up on my own 2 feet for that one, but it has gathered momentum now, which I'm glad about. But that helps with the fact that I was a youth worker in Leigh for quite some time, and as an activist, I do really love demos. So I've been to a few. I've been to the Black Lives Matter demos, the Tories out one, but again, that's political affiliation. And the fact that the state was funding Donald Trump's state visit, I categorically disagree with that. It's just millionaires getting things for free. I just don't get it. So I've demonstrated there as just me, just Jess, a few times, which is shared amongst generations, I think. I know the last BLM demos that we had was orchestrated by young people, millennials, and younger. So I think for me, they're a good entry point as well if you want to be an activist at demonstration, because you're doing it on your own and you're sharing your views, but when you get there, you've got like-minded people to make you feel a bit safer. So for me, they're big ones, I think.
Can I just ask you something off the back of that? It was just thinking about how you started in this career and like what sort of led you into this, was it a calling or was something, specific?
Well, I did live in a household where my mum, she supported Labour, but she's just a voter. She's not an activist. She's got strong opinions, as you taught me, from right or wrong. So I knew from a young age, sort of left-wing ideologies, but she's not really. I didn't grow up in a household where it was like demonstrations and all of this sort of stuff. So, but she was a big influence in me. But she was very big on me finding a career, and I was that child that didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had a love for sociology. So she supported me in going to university. I got a sociology degree. I became a teacher. Too young, actually. I was too young to be a teacher. I was too immature, rather. And then ended up teaching Thatcherism, which I very quickly hated. If you know anything about sociology, you'll know that you've got to pick apart religion. You've got to pick apart ideologies. So I had to teach Thatcherism, the pros and cons of Thatcherism. And that sparked something in me, because I was very aware that my mum hated Thatcher. She made that clear from birth. but the door was not open to left wing, right wing, all of that sort of stuff, until I taught this subject. And I was like, I don't agree with what I'm teaching, but I had to teach it because I was a professional. And then in my class, there was someone that was standing for council in Astley Moseley Common, who later went on to be an MP. So I was teaching her sociology, and that's how we met. And then at the end of term, she asked me, because I was doing a Christmas, what was I doing? I was doing something in the community. I was doing a Christmas fair, and I was getting brighter above her. So I was talking to my student at the time about this. It was Jo. It's Jo. I don't know why I'm not saying her name. It's Jo Platt. I taught her, and she said, I can tell that you are very Labour, all of this sort of stuff. And at dinner times, we were having these conversations, and she said, are you a member? And me at 21, and I was like, I don't really know what that means. Like, I vote Labour most of the time. Sometimes I forget. And she was like, no, you can get membership, all this. So I did join the Labour Party, and then I went to a meeting, and I was like, sorry, Jo, this is really boring. Because they are. If you've ever been to a CLP meeting, they're so boring. They still are. And then Jo finished college, I moved on, I retrained. And she said, well, you can get positions and change it and make a change, all this. So I learned, I listened, met Andy Burnham, all of this sort of stuff. And then I don't know what happened. Here I am on the executive. So yeah, Jo got distinctions, by the way, in sociology. So
well done, Jo.
Yeah, really weird that I met her before then, and then people, because of the age difference, I was 21 at the time. Everyone was like, "You were her teacher." I was like, "Yeah, no, I was a graduate teacher." So strange.
We're kind of like, we're running out of time, but I wanted. There's a good question here that I wanted to ask, or if Katie wanted to ask her question, I don't mind asking it for her.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it was just about gender stereotyping, because it's something that I think underpins a lot of the stuff that you've brought up, that everybody's brought up, to do with toxic masculinity and to do with so much. And I think so often children and young people, even if they've got people who are positive in their lives and who do try and unpick that for them, they come up against it again and again at school, with that, well, some with their own parents. But it was just, if you had any advice for children and young people about how to dismantle that stereotyping for themselves when it is constantly getting reinforced.
Yeah. For me, with young people, it's normalizing and usualizing things. But for youth work, it's better if you've got a whole family approach. So the best outcomes are when the family support you as a professional, or you as somebody else in their young person's life, and just to look at the resources that do exist and sort of normalize them into every day. So rather than going to the pink and blue aisles, go to the green and yellow aisles, to just make it a bit more normal, and look for role models for young people to say, actually, they don't wear a dress all pink, this is a tomboy, or whichever label they may have. And just, I mentioned it in the video, but role models are really, really crucial for young people, seeing it, hearing it, making it normal to them, so then they don't question. In fact, they'd go as far as question other people that don't think it's normal, because it's just normalized to them. So Michelle Obama, we've mentioned, she's a good one to look at, because she was one of the most proactive first ladies in modern time. So that would be my advice: finding charities or social media stars that challenge the norm and create a new normal for young people, because they're very open to learning about these things. There's a child on Instagram, called Brody, that I follow, who dances, and he gets quite a lot of hate because he's a young boy in a dress that dances, but it's because that's what he loves. So it's people like that, I think, to challenge the system, and it takes bravery to challenge the system as well.
Yeah, I think that's really, I think there's a couple of things, like I really loved how you talked about the resilience building in young people that you do with the youth work.
So important.
And Hannah said, I heard somebody say recently that too often people think resilience means putting up with rubbish, and actually saying, no, this is wrong, is actually the real resilience. That's really great thing to...
Funnily enough, that's why I left Wigan Council. Because during a restructure, they said, oh, it builds resilience. I said, that's not what resilience is.
Wow.
I was off then. They said I was too political anyway, so it's fine.
But also as well, just quickly, I know we're...
I wanted to just mention, just Helen, before you, so to say that Amy had mentioned about Michelle Obama. And
I was going to say.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, because Amy said Michelle Obama is of working class background, and she sees so many connections between African Americans and Northern working class folks. And I just wanted to say that actually a lot of sort of like the kind of where there's like African American populations are quite large in America. There's also obviously quite a lot of industrial kind of like heritage in these places as well, and there's a really similar, there's something about geography, like it's like a book about the geography of the world, and then almost like the politics and the sociology that's kind of built up on top of geographical features and stuff like that. And there's a lot of similarity between some of those areas in America physically, like geographically, and the northern and the north, which I just thought, I can't remember what the book's called, but I think that's an interesting thing as well. But she asks, do you see a similarity between African Americans and the northern working class, Jess?
I would never want to compare oppressions, but there are similarities in being the underdog and being hidden figures, I think, that have created an atmosphere that we're trying to push for change. I think the class divide as a whole in this country is not spoken enough and not spoken about enough. I think because of the status quo, I think because people aren't seeking for change.
Probably the loss of a lot of heavy industry as well has kind of made it kind of soft and blurry and confused as well. So people don't necessarily either want to claim that as their basis or...
Funnily enough, talking of Thatcher, as I mentioned her before, part of the module in sociology of Thatcherism is the demise of the working class, because she blurred the lines. Try before you buy, put your pound in your TV. It made working class people feel middle class. And from then you've got people that are definitely closer to poverty than they are sustained income, that think they are middle class. So then when they see other people that have the identity of working class, they try not to relate. They say, well, I'm middle class because I've actually got this really big TV and I've got 2 cars on finance. And that, what happened then, buy your council house, buy your TV, put £1 in the back, all of that happened now is the same that happened then is happening now, but just in different sort of ways. So you feel middle class because you can afford a package, a holiday, when really you're paying it off in monthly installments because you don't have that money. And that's the demise of the working class, because there's no identity. We don't know who we are anymore. People say I'm not middle class because I'm not working class because I went to university.
Yeah, when you have a degree and you're a professional, and if you work as a lecturer, you're not in the ABC, CA, what is it? I can't remember the thingy now. But
there's also an underclass as well, and I think that's something that they don't really talk about. But I totally agree. I think class is just one of the biggest barriers to a lot of things, and then when you intersect that with other things, then you get even more problems.
I think Amy, did you raise your hand again? Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking because I took the class yesterday, and I was thinking because I studied history, and I was thinking these are the same people that would have generationally been involved with the Lancashire famine, and that's why I was putting together the connections that were in. But there's, I mean, people, I don't know. I mean, there's so many parallels. If you put Northern Monkey and you put Black person, they're going to say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, my grandmother worked in a mill, you know, on my dad's side. I mean, I think there's more parallels, but I think we get hung up on that the Black experience and the Northern experience are very similar. It's not, and I'm mixed race from America going, whoa, this is very similar to me. Like, it's about keeping you down, that you don't want to be better than you are, that you want to stay in the same neighborhood, but yet, there's so many parallels, and I'm going to probably sit and think about this. But there's a wonderful woman who was a great friend of mine, and her name was Nellie Stone Johnson. And you remind me so much of her, Jess. You should look her up. She was the first Black woman elected in Minnesota to be an elected official in the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. And I was in Young DFL. That stuff is so boring. Jess, you're right. It bores people to tears. But I was in YDFL, and we're the only we were the only socialists really left in America in the Midwest. So there's a lot of parallels but I think it's because I come from an intersectional place where instead of worrying that we're trying to, because obviously I'm from where George Floyd was murdered. I went to high school, like, that's the Black community there. Like, and we had, like, it was very segregated, but no one talked about it because of redlining. Anyway, that's all of it said. But I just see so many pieces, from making tassels to seeing where does that fit in, to seeing how the way they talked about women's movements, it's about the civil rights movement, you know what I mean, about women doing work. It just blows my mind. But don't be afraid of that. We should start unifying together.
I mean, it was after.
Don't be afraid of saying, yes, I have solidarity with you, because we had the same oppressors. Don't be afraid of that, because that's really what it is, because no one wanted to use the cotton out of slave labor. And they saw that they were enslaved in the mill system. I go to Tatten Park, even Mother's Day is screwed up. I like American Mother's Day. It's an anti-war thing. It isn't, I get to see my mama once, like, in a color purple, like Miss Seeley. Not Miss Seeley, like Sophia. When she sees her kid once, same experience. So don't be afraid of that, Jess, because it's all about making us, I see where you don't want to step and say, I'm a white lady, I don't want to do that. But I think it's about finding solidarity, and it's intersectional. And there's a lot of mixed race people. I look like a little old white lady all the time, but I'm not, you know, because I understand colorism. And that's a whole other kettle of fish. But I was just saying, like, I learned so much even from yesterday, you ladies. So I see it all kind of coming together.
It's amazing to hear you talking.
Sorry, it just blows. Don't be afraid of it.
There's so much there, and it is amazing to sort of hear you talk about all the links between things, and it makes me think. And I know I've looked into this before, and I can't quite remember. But like, you think of music, like all the soul bands would come in the 60s to the northern clubs. Like, we used to get it, you know, like. There's a
lot of webs of connection, and
there is.
I live really close to Hay Hall, and obviously like the actual building of Hay Hall is like one thing, but the plantations around it, like the park plantations, were built by working people from Wigan who were out of work because they were striking from work from they were supporting the cotton famine. I mean, they were supporting like America, so they were living in the cotton famine, so then there was a kind of public works program to employ people, and so they built Hay Hall. So Hay Hall's like rich with both horrific history and then that sort of kind of positive public works that was done in a kind of response of solidarity, in a sense, as a kind of mixed layers of the history, but the links are all there.
Well, it's really incredible to hear that. Yeah, I think it's yeah, something that I will think about as well today. I think, yeah, you've made some really good points there. Oh,
Yeah,
I wish I could just talk all day.
Does anybody, just before we go, does anybody just want to hold their sigil up that they created? You don't have to if you don't want to, but it'd be really great to see if you we can create something. Oh, beautiful. It does like a diamond, Jess. Ping.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Beautiful.
Gorgeous. If you want to share those, if you're on Instagram, then you can tag us. We'll just, are we okay to send an email, Britt, to hi Joe.
Hi Joe.
It's great to see you. Are we okay to send everybody out an email, Britt, just to say Instagram tags, hashtag, and also just to remind people that they can just email a photograph of their sigil if they want to send it and they don't want to put it on social media. If you want it to be used in the future for any of our workshops, because we're embedding them into clay pieces with kids and being well, yeah, we've got all kinds of stuff, yeah. And if you don't want to share it, you don't have to. You can fold it, you can tuck it behind a picture frame and keep it safe, and that's one way of charging it. You can burn it in a fire-safe manner. You can burn it to kind of like, you know, give it off to the ether or whatever, or you can carve it onto a piece of fruit and you can eat that piece of fruit, and you can, you know, ingest your feeling if you want to, or you can just put it in the bin, doesn't matter. but yeah, it'd be great if you could send them to us.
And I think there's a couple of questions that we just didn't get a chance to speak to, which were more about menstruality, and I feel like it's maybe like opening into a different conversation that might, we're already 50 minutes behind, so I'm really sorry that we've not gone there today. But yeah, thank you so much, Jess. It's been brilliant, and thanks everybody for coming. Yeah, and spending time with us.
So I'll be joining the International Women's Day Spinners Mill chat. I think it's quite informal. I'll be joining that one on Monday as well. So if you want just a bit more informal, there's that one as well. So if you find them on Twitter, I'll be at that one as well.
We've got Yvonne here as well.
Yeah, Joan, I think Yvonne might have just left, but do you want to just mention Joan, mention Yvonne's talk as well?
Yeah, the museum as well. We've got an online event. It's free. Yvonne Eckersley, who was on before, I think she's just left. She'll be talking about 100 years of activism of Wigan politics, women in Wigan politics. So I think it would fit really well with all you guys are into. And that's free. It's 1 till 2. Just go on to Eventbrite and you can get. It's on the Wigan Museum
on
Twitter and Facebook.
When's that Monday?
Monday at 1 o'clock.
And what time is your Spinners Mill one as well, Jeff?
It's in my diary.
Yes.
It's when?
On at 11.
On at 11, right? So you've got a good day there.
Do both.
Yeah, do both.
Yeah, do both. Yeah.
I think
a whole day of women's activism. Yay!
Yeah.
Yes, the way it should be. Fabulous. Oh, lovely to spend the afternoon with you all, and thanks again to Jess.
Yeah.
Can I just give a shout out that Tamara's just turned a camera on just as we're leaving. So pretty.
Hi Tamara. Okay, so yeah, we hope to see you soon. We're doing some more things to do with these Lancashire women, so we'll see you at some future things, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much.